Some mysteries may be hiding beneath our feet. Others may arrive in the middle of the night, invite us aboard impossible craft, or leave behind technology that refuses to obey the rules we know. And sometimes they raise questions that reach far beyond UFOs themselves. Tonight, we'll explore 4 encounters that continue to blur the line between folklore, testimony, and the truly unexplained. Welcome to Strange Encounters. I want to take you into a report that sits somewhere between cave exploration and something far harder to explain. It comes from Camden County, Missouri, recorded as a personal account and later shared through UFO folklore archives. There are no official investigations tied to it and no verified identity attached to the witness. What remains is a detailed narrative preserved through retellings and a kind of consistency that makes it difficult to simply ignore. In the summer of 1995, the witness reportedly set out alone to explore a cave system in rural Missouri. The region itself is known for extensive limestone formations and underground networks shaped over millions of years by water and erosion. Caving in this part of the state is not unusual, and experienced explorers often come across passages that have not been documented in detail. The entrance described in this account was narrow and concealed, almost blending into the surrounding terrain. Once inside, the witness descended roughly 50 feet, moving from tighter passages into a more open chamber system. At first, everything behaved as expected for a natural cave. Irregular stone surfaces, damp air, and the constant echo that makes it difficult to judge distance underground. He moved carefully through several connected chambers, taking his time in scanning for anything out of the ordinary. By his own account, he explored similar environments before, and nothing initially suggested anything unusual about this system. Eventually, he reached what appeared to be the deepest accessible point. The passage ahead was narrowed and then angled upward, forming a small opening high on the chamber wall. It was here that the character of the experience began to shift in subtle but noticeable ways. Sound behaved differently. He first noticed a faint rustling from above, which he assumed was bats. That assumption made sense in a cave environment, but the sound did not remain consistent. It developed structure, repetition, and then something that no longer resembled natural movement. Mechanical noise followed, faint at first, then more distinct, and underneath it, the impression of voices carrying through stone. Time perception also became difficult to judge. Underground, without natural light, minutes can stretch or collapse without warning, and the witness later described feeling increasingly unsettled by how long he had been in the deeper sections of the cave. Despite this, curiosity outweighed hesitation. He climbed toward the elevated opening, which was positioned roughly 10 feet above the chamber floor. The surface was narrow, but just wide enough to allow him to brace himself and look through. On the other side, he saw light. It was not natural. There was no gradual glow or reflection from outside daylight. Instead, there was a steady, controlled illumination that suggested artificial placement. The passage beyond the opening extended only a short distance before opening into a much larger space carved from limestone. The air moving through the opening was noticeably different, warm, slightly stagnant, and carrying a sharp chemical odor that he later compared to vinegar or acidic cleaning agents. It was strong enough to be immediately noticeable and difficult to ignore. Inside the illuminated chamber, he could see a structured environment. The stone walls were natural in composition, but the lighting and arrangement suggested something had been occupying or modifying the space. One object stood out immediately, a small vehicle resembling a golf cart, but lower to the ground than any standard human design. The most unusual detail was the absence of visible wheels, giving it a hovering or suspended appearance depending on the angle of observation. As he watched, he began to hear movement approaching the vehicle. The voices he had faintly detected earlier were now clearer, echoing through the chamber. Whatever was present was moving with purpose. Then he saw the figure. The witness described it as a non-human entity standing approximately 7 feet tall. Its skin was brown and scaly, with a texture that suggested reptilian biology rather than mammalian. The face retained a humanoid structure with a flat nose and proportionally normal eyes, but there were no visible ears or hair. A ridge-like structure ran across the top of the skull and continued down the back of the neck. The arms were long and heavily muscled, ending in hands that appeared broadly human in structure, though larger and more pronounced. A long tail extended from the lower back, estimated at 4 to 5 feet in length, tapering into a thin point. It wore what appeared to be a metallic gold suit, fitted closely to its body, including pants and enclosed footwear. An oval-shaped object, possibly a container or equipment pack, was attached to its back. The entity appeared focused on the vehicle as though inspecting or interacting with it. The witness remained motionless, observing from the narrow opening, aware that any sound or movement could reveal his position. He had brought a camera and managed to take several photographs during this moment. According to later descriptions, the resulting images were unclear and distorted, but they remained part of the original account. For a brief period, nothing changed. The entity continued its focus on the vehicle. The chamber remained steady, lit, and controlled, with no indication that the witness had been detected. Then the shift happened. The creature stopped what it was doing and turned toward the opening. The reaction was immediate. It locked its attention directly onto the witness and emitted a sharp hissing sound that carried across the chamber. There was no hesitation, no gradual awareness, just immediate recognition and response. That moment ended the observation. The witness retreated quickly, climbing down from the opening and moving back through the narrow passages he had originally entered. The return journey was described as disorientating. The cave system that had felt manageable on the way in now seemed tighter, longer, and more difficult to navigate. When he finally reached the entrance, he was physically shaken and struggling to control his breathing. He left the area without attempting to return immediately. In the days that followed, he did not report the experience publicly. It remained private for years, only later emerging through secondary compilation sources. He continued exploring caves in the region, but avoided returning to this specific system. Eventually, he attempted to relocate the site, but claimed that access was no longer possible, stating that the area had become restricted and was under government control. That detail has never been independently verified. What remains is a single account preserved through repetition and documentation by third-party sources. A man exploring a cave system in Missouri who claims to have encountered something that should not have been there. A structured underground chamber, a vehicle operating without visible wheels, and a tall reptilian figure moving with apparent purpose. Whether this represents misidentification, fabrication, or something genuinely unexplained is impossible to determine from the available information. What can be said is that it fits into a broader pattern of reports describing unusual activity in deep underground environments. These accounts often share certain elements: artificial lighting in natural caves, industrial or structured spaces far below the surface, and the recurring suggestion that something may exist in subterranean environments beyond normal human awareness. For now, this case remains unverified, a fragment of a larger body of anomalous reports. One more story from deep underground, where visibility is limited and certainty is even more difficult to reach. Stories like that often leave us wondering whether the unknown is hiding in places we simply never explored. Deep caves, abandoned tunnels, forgotten passages beneath our feet. But some reports suggest that unusual encounters don't require a descent into the earth at all. Sometimes they begin with something as ordinary as a late-night phone call and a voice asking for help with something that should be impossible. According to a reported account dated September 3, 1995, a man identified as Mark Andrews described an experience that he later shared as one of the most unusual encounters of his life, involving what he believed to be non-human contact. The experience reportedly began shortly after midnight when Andrews was at home and received an unexpected phone call from a female voice that immediately established an unusual and authoritative tone. According to his account, the voice informed him that they had what were described as students from another planet present with them, and asked if he would be willing to assist with what was referred to as Earth orientation training. He reportedly agreed, despite feeling uncertain about the situation and not fully understanding what he was being drawn into at the time. Then he heard a second instruction telling him that one of the students was standing in his driveway and that he should follow her without delay. At the end of the driveway, Andrews reportedly encountered a young woman who appeared entirely human, described as petite in stature with Mediterranean features, olive skin tone, and intricately woven hair styled in a detailed pattern, wearing a burgundy wrap-style robe that looked almost ceremonial in design. Without any further explanation, she led him around to the side of the house, where he reported seeing a sudden flash of soft but intense light that seemed to envelop the area and mark an immediate transition in his surroundings. In his account, that moment of light was followed by what he perceived as instantaneous transport to the interior of a vast craft located far beyond Earth, with no visible sense of distance or travel time. He described the environment as vast, structured, and highly organized, with multiple partition areas separated by movable walls, creating a clinical and controlled sense of order rather than anything resembling a conventional spacecraft layout. One of the first things he recalled was being guided to a viewing portal that looked out into deep space, where the sheer scale of the cosmic environment caused a strong emotional and physical reaction. He reported being shown a screen displaying diagrams of celestial objects such as asteroids and comets, along with projected trajectories toward Earth, accompanied by an explanation that their presence in the solar system was connected to monitoring potential threats. The witness asked where they were from and was told the name of the world, which he later recalled as Lelari, shown visually as a projection resembling the constellation known from Earth as the Big Dipper. He was then guided through additional sections of the craft, divided by movable partitions that created separate functional areas designed to isolate different activities without interference. In one of these areas, he encountered a tall blonde woman who was performing what appeared to be a medical examination, after which she reviewed a monitor and simply stated that his examination was complete, with no further explanation. He also described a break room-style area where several individuals were gathered casually, including a young male who jokingly pointed at him and said he had been assigned to act as a babysitter. Later, he was brought before a commanding officer seated at a small table, who initially did not acknowledge his presence, appearing focused on a handheld display for several minutes. When Andrews asked to hear their spoken language, The officer responded by projecting a telepathic sentence directly into his mind, which he later described as sounding somewhat like a blend of Finnish and Latin in structure and tone. He then requested a souvenir from the encounter and was told it would be arranged at a later point, though no further detail was provided. Overwhelmed by emotion, he began to cry, after which his guide gently took hold of his arm and escorted him back through what he described as a teleportation transition, returning him to the exterior of his home. He remained awake for the rest of the night, reportedly shaken by the intensity of the experience and unable to return to normal sleep. Accounts of alleged contact often focus on extraordinary conversations and impossible journeys, experiences that exist almost entirely through the memories of a single witness, and every so often, a different kind of story emerges, one that claims something tangible was left behind, not just a visitor, but a craft, a physical object that, according to those involved, challenged the limits of engineering and even the nature of space itself. This account comes from a cluster of reports that surfaced around the mid-1970s, centered loosely around the Ohio and Michigan border region. The exact details vary depending on the source, but the core of the story begins with an alleged coded military communication referencing a recovered object. According to the information being circulated, a disc-shaped craft had come down under unclear circumstances during the spring of 1975. Some versions describe a malfunction, others suggest it may have been brought down or interfered with by another unidentified craft. The object itself was consistently described as a metallic disc approximately 50 feet in diameter, with a dome section on top and 3 landing supports beneath it. Inside, reports claim there were biological entities recovered from the wreckage. In most versions, 3 humanoid beings were found. 2 were reportedly deceased at the scene, while a third was still alive when recovered. The beings were described as small in stature, with gray-toned skin and unusual hand structure, often noted as having 3 fingers. One detail that appears in later retellings is the claim that their blood was copper-based, a composition not known in human biology. From this point, the narrative shifts away from the crash site and into claims of transport and containment. According to the account, both the craft and the biological remains were transferred under military control to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. This base appears frequently in UFO literature as a supposed storage and research location for recovered aerial phenomena, although no verified public record confirms these specific claims. A second strand of testimony then enters the story, coming from a civilian contractor working within the defense industry during the same general period. He described being informed by his supervisor that he had been selected for a classified assignment involving examination of recovered foreign technology. Initially, he assumed this meant adversary hardware, likely Soviet or Chinese. That assumption reportedly changed once he was brought into a high-security briefing conducted by Air Force personnel. The briefing was structured carefully with strict language controls. The object was not described as unusual or unidentified. Instead, it was framed as foreign aircraft technology, and the group was assigned under a neutral designation that implied routine defense analysis work. Eventually, the contractor and a small team were escorted into a secure hangar. Inside, they reported seeing a disc-shaped craft resting on landing supports. From the outside, it matched earlier descriptions, approximately 50 feet in diameter, with a domed upper section and 3 landing legs extending to the ground. A ramp led into an open entry point along the lower edge of the structure. The most unusual portion of the testimony begins when the team entered the interior of the craft. The witness described a pronounced mismatch between external size and internal space. What should have been a confined interior appeared to extend far deeper than the exterior dimensions would allow. He described walking forward for several minutes without reaching a clear boundary or endpoint. The corridor-like space continued in a way that did not match conventional architectural expectations. At the time, there was no framework offered to explain what they were seeing. The experience was described more in terms of disorientation than interpretation. Only later, in retrospective analysis of the account, did the idea emerge that the interior space may not have been physically consistent with the external structure. Some later interpretations suggest advanced spatial manipulation or non-standard geometry. Others describe it as a constructed internal environment that does not conform to normal physical scaling. In the original testimony, however, the description remains grounded in observation rather than explanation. Deeper inside, the group was reportedly given a guided walkthrough of sections of the craft under strict supervision. The details of those sections vary between retellings, but the consistent element is that the interior did not behave in a way that matched conventional aerospace design. From there, the account fades back into broader claims of classified containment, with both the craft and biological materials allegedly retained for ongoing study at a secured facility. Like many cases from this period, the story ultimately exists as a layered mixture of contractor testimony, secondhand military attribution, and later interpretive framing. The core claims remain unverified, but the consistency of certain motifs has kept the account circulating within UFO literature for decades. Recovered craft have become a familiar part of UFO folklore, along with stories of military secrecy and hidden technology. Yet, among all of those claims, one account stands apart. It isn't remembered for a crash site or a classified hangar, but for what allegedly happened after the recovery, because according to one controversial narrative, one of the occupants survived, and for a brief period, a conversation took place that would go on to challenge ideas about consciousness, identity, and what it means to be alive. Among the countless stories connected to the Roswell incident, most tend to follow familiar ground: a crash in the desert, military recovery operations, conflicting witness accounts. Decades of speculation about what was really found and what was later explained away. But there is one account that takes a very different direction. It does not focus on debris fields or secret hangars. Instead, it centers on a claim that one of the occupants survived the crash, and that, for a short period of time in 1947, an Army nurse was assigned to communicate with it. The story comes from a book titled Alien Interview, which was published decades after the alleged events. It presents itself as a reconstructed account based on the writings of a woman named Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, an Army Air Force nurse stationed at Roswell at the time. There's no independent verification of her identity or her involvement in these events, and the material remains highly controversial within UFO research circles. Still, the narrative itself is what continues to attract attention. According to the account, shortly after the crash, military personnel discovered a surviving entity among the wreckage. Unlike the more common descriptions of recovered bodies, this being was said to be alive, alert, and observing its surroundings with complete calm. Attempts to communicate with it using spoken language, written notes, and even basic signals reportedly failed. The being did not respond in any conventional way. It simply watched. Matilda writes that she was later assigned to assist with the situation in a medical capacity, although the role quickly shifted into something far less conventional than nursing. She describes entering a secured facility where the surviving being was being held. Military and scientific personnel were present, but none of their efforts had produced any meaningful communication. The being itself was described as small in stature, with smooth gray skin, a proportionally large head, and very large dark eyes. Its appearance has become familiar through later depictions in UFO culture, but in the account itself, it is presented in a very clinical, almost observational way. There's no dramatic reaction described, no fear or aggression, just quiet observation. Matilda claims that when she first looked directly into the being's eyes, she experienced something unexpected. Not a voice, not a gesture, but a direct stream of thought. Complete ideas, fully formed, appearing in her mind without words. At first, she believed she was imagining it, but the experience reportedly repeated, becoming clearer and more consistent until it was understood that communication was occurring entirely through what she interpreted as telepathy. From that point onward, she became the only person who could reliably communicate with the being. The military reportedly observed this development closely, documenting sessions while Matilda acted as an intermediary. The being, according to her account, eventually provided a name, Errol. What followed were a series of interviews that would later form the basis of the book. Errol did not describe itself as an alien in the way humans typically understand the term. Instead, it introduced a concept that is central to the entire narrative. It stated that it was not a biological organism at all. It referred to itself as an is-be. Matilda interpreted this as meaning an immortal spiritual being. According to Errol's explanation, an is-be is not created at birth and does not end at death. Instead, it exists independently of physical form and merely occupies bodies as a means of interacting with the physical universe. Bodies in this framework are temporary tools, vehicles rather than identities. When a body fails, the is-be does not die, it simply moves on. This idea alone would already place the story outside conventional scientific understanding, but the account continues further. When asked about death, Errol allegedly stated that physical destruction has no effect on consciousness itself. The awareness that inhabits a body continues regardless of physical condition. In other words, what humans experience as personal identity is not tied to biology, but to something that exists beyond it. As the interviews continued, Matilda describes Errol expanding on this idea in more detail. According to the account, Earth is not simply a naturally evolved world populated by intelligent life. Instead, it is described as a controlled environment where is-bes are held in a cycle of repeated physical incarnation. When a person dies, the is-be is not allowed to simply leave freely. Instead, it is intercepted and its memory is allegedly erased before it's placed into another newborn body. The result is a cycle of forgetting. Each lifetime feels new because the previous ones are no longer accessible. This process, according to Errol, is not natural. It's enforced. Matilda records that the being described this system in a detached, almost clinical manner, as if explaining a mechanism rather than making a moral judgment. Over time, the narrative expands further into what could be described as cosmic history. Errol allegedly refers to ancient conflicts involving advanced civilizations long before recorded human history. It speaks of empires that rose and collapsed, of regions of space controlled by different groups, and of Earth itself being influenced repeatedly by external forces. Human civilization in this telling is not unique or isolated, but part of a much older and far larger structure of existence. At times, Errol is described as observing humanity with a kind of analytical curiosity, almost like an anthropologist studying a culture that has lost awareness of its own origins. One of the more unusual aspects of Matilda's account is the tone of the being itself. There is no sense of urgency or warning, no attempt to convince or convert. Instead, Errol is portrayed as calm, precise, and emotionally detached. It answers questions directly, as though providing information that should already be understood. Matilda writes that this lack of emotional reaction was one of the most unsettling aspects of the interaction. Not hostility, but the absence of human-like framing entirely. The interviews reportedly continued over a period of weeks, with military personnel observing and documenting the sessions. Eventually, according to the account, the communication ended as abruptly as it had begun. The being was removed from the facility, and no further contact was recorded. What remains is Matilda's written account, which was later compiled and published many years after the alleged events took place. There are, however, significant questions surrounding the story. There is no independently verified record of Matilda O'Donnell McElroy in official Roswell documentation. The timing of the publication, decades after the incident, makes verification difficult, and many of the ideas presented in the interviews bear similarities to existing philosophical and science fiction concepts that predate the book. Some researchers have suggested that the narrative may be a work of speculative fiction presented in documentary form. Others argue that it reflects a reinterpretation of spiritual and metaphysical ideas through a UFO framework. Despite these uncertainties, the story continues to circulate widely, particularly because of the questions it raises rather than any claims it definitely proves. If consciousness is not produced by the brain, but instead merely uses it, what does that imply about identity itself? If memory can be erased or disrupted, what becomes of experience? And if stories like this are fictional in origin, why do they so often return to the same central themes across different cultures and eras? Whether viewed as testimony, allegory, or imagination, Alien Interview remains one of the more unusual interpretations of the Roswell mythos, not because of the crash itself, but because of what it claims was said afterward. There is no independently verified evidence that these conversations ever took place. The identity of Matilda O'Donnell McElroy remains difficult to confirm, and many researchers believe Alien Interview is nothing more than an elaborate work of fiction. Yet the story refuses to disappear. Perhaps that's because it asks questions that reach far beyond flying saucers and crashed spacecraft. What if consciousness really does survive the death of the body? What if humanity has forgotten more of its own history than it remembers? And what if the greatest mystery isn't whether intelligent life exists somewhere else in the universe, but whether we've forgotten that we were once part of it? Whether you see Alien Interview as hidden truth, imaginative fiction, or something in between, it remains one of the most unusual and thought-provoking accounts ever connected to the Roswell legend. And nearly 80 years later, the conversation that supposedly never happened is still making people question everything they think they know about who we are. Whether these stories represent hidden truths, misunderstood events, or simply the power of human imagination is for you to decide. If you enjoyed exploring the unexplained with us, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more strange encounters, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next episode of Strange Encounters.